We are going to be exploring Gila Fine's book. It is brand new. It has a fun title, The Madwoman and the Rabbi's Attic, Rereading the Women of the Talmud. So what she does is she uses popular tropes that are generally associated with women. And kind of turns it on its head. So for example, there is the trope of the shrew, right? Taming of the shrew, right? There's the trope of the femme fatale, the prima donna, the Madonna or the whore. And the one we're looking at today is the angel in the house. So it looks like some of you have already looked at the definition of angel in the house, but based on what you associate with that topic, what comes to mind when you hear the trope of describing women as angel in the house? What are we supposed to be?
Sara, could I just say something?
Yes.
I um I actually my son lives in Potomac, and the author of the book, I think she wrote another book, came to Beth Shalom in Potomac. I think you know the rabbi there. He came,
Yeah,
he was,
Rabbi Antin.
I'm sorry?
Yes, Rabbi Antin.
Yes, yes. And she was amazing. She talked about the book and about everything. So I'm really excited about this. Thank you.
Good. Well, she has spoken at Maharat as well, but before she came out with the book is brand new. So um,
Yes.
I'm also super excited about sharing it with everybody. Okay, so the angel in the house. What is your association with the descriptor of angel in the house? What is that?
Could it be Aisha Kyle?
That's exactly what I was thinking, Felice. Exactly.
Right. Okay, could be Aisha Kyle, like the lovely woman.
Yes. The woman who does everything, the balabuster.
The balabaster. Yes, go ahead.
Does this and she does that not only in her house, she's working.
Good. So the Aisha Kyle's description is that she both weaves inside the house, she takes care of her husband. So I think that would be the definition of angel in the house, but also has her leaving the house. And I think that that's a key factor in what it means to be the angel in the house, right? The angel in the house is the definition of the woman who is internal, who is the master is not the right word, the homemaker, the somebody who's not engaged in politics or the external world. So let's just read, and actually our starting point is
another suggestion.
Yes, Judy.
Yes, another suggestion, may I?
Yes, please.
For Aisha and Chayil, she could be the wife of the Chayil, like especially now in today's times when the women are behind the fighting force, the Chayil, and that's a very important role.
Yeah, I think Judy, thank you for bringing that in, because there's nothing wrong, right, with being the homemaker, the woman behind the chayil, the woman who's keeping the home going, right there. It's good. And I think that what's in our modern mentality, the way I think about those choices is that people can make choices today, right? You know, there was a time though, maybe not too long ago even, that women really didn't have a choice. Like they really weren't allowed. I don't know. They just weren't outside the house. Today, you know, homemakers and being the person who's taking control of the home is seen as a value and is a choice that women are welcome to make if that's what they choose. But I think that we're going back to talking about a time where women really didn't have that choice.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
even in my time, you might work a bit before, I say you're married, you might work a bit before you had children, but in particular, once you had children, my role was to take care of the house and the children, and my husband did the outside. It was sort of understood. Later on, as we got into the workforce, I think that changed.
Right.
But
Right. So, yes. And I think that the intent here is not to undermine that role at all, but to see if that's or to examine together if that's the only defining role of a woman. So let's look together at how Gila Fine introduces the definition of the angel in the house, and actually where the phrase comes from, which I was interested in. So the angel in the house is the idealized image of
Make
a
it loud. Could you make it bigger, please? It's very hard to see, although I could probably click on the link you sent, but it's very hard to see. Maybe other people don't have access. Perfect. Perfect. Thank
The
you.
angel in the house is the idealized image of a woman as the perfect wife, mother, and homemaker, coined in the 19th century in a poem by Coventry Patmore by the same name, right? So he, I didn't, have others heard of him? I hadn't, so I had to look him up a little bit. So I'll just tell you, he was born in 1823, died in 1896. He was an English poet, a literary critic, and he's known for a book of poetry called The Angel in the House. And it's a narrative poem about the Victorian ideal of a happy marriage. Okay, so it's the archetype. The archetype is based on the Victorian doctrine of separate spheres, the divide between the male domain of the public, the civic and the political, and the female domain of the private, the domestic and the familial. It was the man who went out in the world to fight and to conquer, to profit and rule, while the woman remained at home to tend to the house and children. So this is a familiar trope to us, and I think that what Gila Fine does in each of our chapters is to expand what that trope means across our literary canons, right? So, for example, if I had to ask, what are some examples of this trope in our Torah or Gemara? Like when you're thinking to the narrative tales in Genesis, what tales come to mind of this sort of image of the woman in the house?
Sara.
Sara, right? She was in the tent.
Rivka taking care of her children.
Rivka taking care of her children. All of them, really, right? From the beginning from Adam and Chava, right? Where after the sin, we see right there that Adam's role was to be in sort of to work and to struggle with work, and her role was to bear children, and he was in charge of her, essentially. The same is true in the Gemara, and we're going to expand on Imma Shalom in a minute, but generally our female characters, even in rabbinic literature, are the wife of, the mother of, right? They're foils to many of the male characters in the Gemara. What about literature? What are some examples of, like in your readings, what have you come across that exemplifies the woman, the angel in the house?
Right, you talking English or Hebrew?
Yeah, like your literature.
Is there to go out to meet the right.
Emily Bronte's books, all of Emily Bronte's books.
Yeah, Jane Austen. I
Yeah.
mean, all of them. Right. I mean, this is like the epitome of romance, is the woman who's at the home looking beautiful. Right. And then the handsome prince comes and swoops in. She brings as an example the fairy tale of Snow White. Right. And this is actually an image I found the image that she also captured in the book. So, you can see over here, this is the same image that I have over here. And it's the image of the homemaker, right? The fairy tale of Snow White presents a perfect image of this domestic ideal, with the dwarfs hi-hoing their way to work every day while Snow White stays behind to cook and clean and sew, a bluebird perch angelically on her shoulder, right? So the quintessential angel in the house. Now, of course, if we followed through this trope even to slightly more modern times, she says at the bottom of page 1, such arguments were pervasive in the late 19th and early 20th century, echoed by the politicians from all countries and clerics of religion. So let me just pause here to ask if anybody's had the pleasure of seeing Suffs yet or has heard about the musical. So let me just, offer this as a gift for all of you. So Suffs is a pretty new Broadway. It started off Broadway and SUFFS as in suffrage, Suffs. So it's called Suffs. It's a musical. It's called it's being called the feminist version of Hamilton. In other words, it's one of these like really well thought out shows. It's written by Shayna Taubes, who sounds like she should be a member here. She appears in the show as well, and it takes us through the 1914 through those early years of the women's suffrage movement towards gaining the vote, and it's just brilliant. It's an all-female cast, so even the President Wilson is played by a woman, or the police are played by women, and the music is really wonderful. And there's this particular scene where the president is deciding whether he should take a meeting with the the leaders of the movement, and he's singing the song about ladies and how the ladies' role is to be at home and allow us men to go out. And anyway, it captures exactly this notion, and it's also just a very touching and beautiful musical. So if that is your thing and you are able to go see it, I highly recommend it. Suffs on Broadway.
Can I throw something else into this mix?
Yes.
I think it's the upper class women, the women who come with money, that went out and did these movements that later on joined by other women. But if you look back, low income or poor women always had to work. They were midwives, they were, stall keepers, they were innkeepers, they all had to work. So it's kind of a myth to separate out, and say all women should only be in the home, because they had no choice. They had to go out of the home.
Well, I think, Carol, that's why this is a literary trope, right? Like it's the sort of idealized version of what women's roles are supposed to be. And just as an aside, the play does, the Broadway show does deal with race and class a little bit. That's just an aside. But yes, your point is well taken. That the reality is actually quite different.
Also, the nursing profession very early on. I mean, nurses were in the medical profession and they had to take care of sick people, but their role was very mitigated and subjugated by physicians. So,
Right.
And we're still fighting for our image today.
Okay, so let's see.
I just wanted to say, I just finished a book called Lady Tan and Her Circle of Women. And it takes place in China in the 16th century. And it's about a woman who wants to be a doctor and how difficult it was for women to practice medicine. But she was from the upper class, and she was supposed to bind her feet, and she was supposed to, be, the domestic arts.
Right.
But
So I think we're establishing here that this is a well-established sort of trope, and that's going to echo in the Talmud as well. What I just want to add before we go and look at our story is that in addition to the suffrage movement in the early 19th and 20th century, the idea of women being allowed to vote was also, of course, present in Israel. And there's a famous statement by Rav Kook, who railed against women being able to leave the house and to vote, because he was concerned about the fact that it would ruin shalom bayit, right? Literally peace in the home. There was a concern that the women would disagree with their husbands and that it would cause a lot of internal debate and fighting. I love this idea because, you know, Rabbi Kook is a great rabbi. He had a lot to offer. And on this topic, he was just on the wrong side of history, right? He was just wrong. And we learn that women did get the vote and that the desire of women to participate in our national debate sort of won out both here and in Israel. So that was sort of a summary of source number 5. Even well into the 20th century, when most women in the Western world were given the right to vote, the doctrine of separate spheres remained culturally dominant, right? So even as women were beginning to have their voice, there was still this sense that their main role was at home, as Ruby was describing to us. So just to summarize, the angel in the house then is the ideal wife and mother, the homemaker and helpmate, modest and innocent, obedient and supportive, sensitive and emotional, restricted to the private sphere, excluded from all public, political, and religious debates, bastion of sanctity and virtue within the home. The peace of the house depends on the peace of the angel in it. Both must be protected from the dangers and strife of the outside world. As long as the angel remains safely inside, she is honored, and the home is safe. But if the boundary between the public and the private is jeopardized, if the outdoors is allowed in or the indoors out, the angel and her house both fall. So what she's introducing here is the question of not only is this trope of women as angel in the house sort of prevalent, but that that when this image is imploded, the whole safety and sanctity of our world is sort of ripped out from us as we know it. And that image and boundary has to be maintained in order for the world to keep turning. And what we're going to look and do right now is look at Imma Shalom, who is one of the women who are named in the Gemara, and see her as first this painted image and picture of the classic angel in the house. And then we're going to complexify it. And as she does, as Gila Fine does, turn it on its head. Just to say that the strategies that Gila Fine uses to analyze these stories is to just read it first, which we're going to do. She wants to put it in context, so we're also going to do that. We're going to understand the story, the stories before and after that come, because I think that like describes and gives color to what the story is bringing out. And she tries to analyze and look at the story through a cultural lens, through a theological lens, a gender lens, obviously. So and each chapter, just to give you a sense of the book, and I encourage you to read it, is kind of long, right? Like it's many pages of like reanalyzing the story. So let's go ahead and jump in and meet Imma Shalom. So Imma Shalom, Divetu. So we're now we're on page 2. I squared out the text because this is going to be our main text that we're going to analyze and come back to a little bit. So I also divided it into scenes so that we can picture what's going on whenever we read a story in Gemara or Tanakh. I always want to encourage people to really close your eyes if necessary, but at least imagine what you think is going on, what the scene looks like, really paint the image. And dividing into scenes, I think, helps us. I'm also giving us some cheat sheet analysis of helping you like imagine whether the scene is taking place indoors and outdoors. And of course, the indoors outdoors analysis is relevant because it's actually part of the definition of the angel in the house, right? The angel in the house is meant to be indoors. And when she leaves and goes outdoors, that sort of begins to shatter and undo the imagery of what it means to be an angel in the house. Okay, so Imma Shalom. By the way, what does Imma Shalom mean?
Mother
Yeah.
of peace, mother
So-
of peace.
Or right away, we're seeing her as this angelic angel, this mother. Her whole name actually describes her as an angel or a mother of peace in the house. And debetu, right? The very next word is she was in the house, literally. We also know that she's the right debate who to Rabbi Eliezer. Debate who, by the way, also means the wife of, like buy it and wife of are sometimes connected. So making the point even more clearly for us, she is the wife of Rabbi Eliezer. We're going to spend some time on figuring out who Rabbi Eliezer is because it's going to be key to our story. But for now, all we need to know is that she is the wife of Rabbi Eliezer and the sister of Rabban Gamliel, right? This is not surprising for us. As I said before, women are always and often introduced in relation to their male counterparts, right? So she's the wife of and the sister of. The reason why she's introduced as the sister of Rabban Gamliel is because he was the big guy, right? They were royalty, so to speak, and he was the head of the Beit Midrash. Just to give you the picture, remember the stories of how Rabban Gamliel was the head of the Beit Midrash, and he was sort of the character who kept a lot of who was elitist, and he kept all of the other people out until there was a coup, and his students took over the Beit Midrash and then added 400 benches to the Beit Midrash, right? It's like that story that's told over and over again about like expanding the walls of the Beit Midrash. But nevertheless, he was still in charge. He was the rabbi in charge, Rabban Gamliel, and Imma Shalom is his sister, which also, by the way, means that their father was somebody of importance. So already we're seeing that, okay, she's introduced as the wife of and the sister of, but we already are understanding through context that she's somebody who was raised even inside the home with Torah and leadership as values, since her brother became the leader of the leading rabbi of the community. Okay, so
Question. Did
Yes.
she grow up learning that she was okay for her to learn Torah and to teach Torah?
we have no idea. We don't know anything about that.
Okay.
Right, or we can make assumptions, though, based on the fact that she was surrounded by rabbis who were leaders, that she was exposed, at least at minimum. But we also know that she, Imma Shalom, she's in the house. So the Gemara further relates, Imma Shalom, the wife of Rabbi Eliezer, was a sister of Rabban Gamliel. From that incident forward, she would not allow Rabbi Eliezer to lower his head and recite the Tachanun prayer. Okay, so we're entering the story in the middle of another story. We're going to have to figure out what from that incident on means, but I can just tell you right now that I'll just sort of describe it outside. The story right before this is the famous story of the oven of Achnai, right? It's the most described and taught story where the rabbis are having a debate about whether something is kosher, and Rabbi Eliezer, who is Imma Shalom's husband, basically says it is pure. And I'm going to prove it by bringing the carob tree. I'm going to prove it by the streams stopping, all of these like magical, mystical miracles that he makes happen. And then, and at every time he makes this miracle occur, the community is like, no, you're wrong. And ultimately it says, Lo b'shamayim right? Right, because there's a bat call, like even God comes out and says, the halacha is accordance with Rabbi Eliezer. And even then, the community says, Lo b'shamayim hi. In other words, the Torah is now in the hands of the people, it's not in God. And it's like the quintessential story of it's often taught as the quintessential story about how we're rabbinic Jews, and that we're living in a world now where interpretation is done by humans and people and our oral tradition. And, whereas as God's word, our Torah is the foundation of everything, the interpretation of that is through humans, right? So that's the typical human-centric versus God-centric debate, and the assessment of that is that it's with humans, but Rabbi Eliezer is on the wrong side of that debate, right? He's the traditionalist. He's the guy who is holding on to the Torah, and so it's him against the rest of the world, so to speak. And what happens again right before the story is that he's excommunicated, right? His colleagues are, you know, not only telling him that he's wrong, but they're like, actually, you're so wrong that you can't really exist amongst us anymore. You're out of here. We're gonna like unpack that a little bit. But when it says that from that incident forward, she would not allow Rabbi Eliezer to lower his head, that incident forward means that they have been excommunicated, they've been asked to leave the main community, and now she, Ima Shalom, is sort of protecting him from lowering his head. What might happen if he lowers his head? If he lowers his head, it means that he's like, not only saying the Tachanun prayer, but he's bemoaning himself, he's feeling sad. And because we're in a moment of miracles, right? Remember the carob tree, the lo bashamayim, bat kol, the God's voice that came out. I guess there's a sense that that's something like maybe he'll die or something will happen if she stops watching him even for a minute, right? Her job as angel in the house is what? Is the protector of her husband. That's her job. And so you have this image of her literally not taking her eyes off of him lest he drops his head even for 1 second. And then what happens? Hahu Yoma Reish Yerchahave, a certain day was around the day of the new moon, and she inadvertently substituted a full 30-day month for a deficient 29 days, i.e., she thought that it was the new moon when one does not lower his head in supplication, but it was not. Some say that a pauper came and stood at the door, and she took bread out to him. What this means is something happened that caused her to take her eyes off of him, even for a moment. There's a machloket about what happened. Either it was she got confused with the month and thought that it was a day where you don't say Tachanun, and so she realized that she didn't have to watch him so closely for a minute because he wouldn't drop his head, because she thought it was Rosh Chodesh where you don't say Tachanun. Or more likely what happened, there was a knock at the door. Somebody was outside. And so she takes her eyes off of him and she leaves her husband. She enters the threshold, right? She's on the threshold of inside and outside. And she gives a piece of bread, right? So this sadekas, this like beautiful giving charitable moment of giving food to to an outsider suddenly interrupts their daily routine. So then what happens? She returns, Ishkachte denafel al anfe. Oh no. She returns and finds that he lowered his head. And she said to him, arise, get up, kum, katla tela. Because by you praying, by you lowering your head, you ultimately, like, some heavenly thing occurred and you caused the death of my brother. Okay, so who's her brother? Her brother is Rabban Gamliel. He's a major leader in the community. Ima Shalom somehow senses and knows that that moment of him lowering her head caused the death of her brother. This happens inside. Meanwhile, Ad hachi nefach shipura mi beit Rabban Gamliel deshachev. Meanwhile, the sound of a shofar emerged from the house of Rabban Gamliel to announce that the Nasi had indeed died, that he had, it is true that he died. So that scene happens outdoors. And then the final scene here indoors is that Amarle Manaya Data Amrela Kach Mekublani Mi Beit Avi Abba Kol Hasha'arim Alayim Chutz Misha'arei Ona'a. Rabbi Eliezer said to her, from where did you know that your brother would die? She said to him, this is the tradition that I received from the house of the father of my father. All the gates of heaven are apt to be locked, except for the gates of prayer for victims of verbal mistreatment. Okay, so we're going to have to unpack that. Let me just give you sort of a very brief explanation right now.
Just doesn't sound like religion. It sounds just like magic.
Well, right. But remember, we're in this like weird moment. Like the context of the Gemara is already like carob trees and like streams. I mean, we're going to see it inside. So yes, you're right. It doesn't sound religious at all. But what I wanted to add though was that whatever she realized wasn't necessarily magic. She explains by saying, I received from the house of my father, right? So there was some kind of teaching or tradition or knowledge that she knew from being around her father, who was a leader of the community, passed down to her brother. And you asked, I think Judy asked, well, was she exposed to learning in Torah? Well, it certainly seems that way, even from this brief little line, that there was some learning and traditions that were passed on to her and gave her the intuition, perhaps, to know that when you drop your head in prayer, this prayer is ultimately praying that somebody's going to die. Why? Because the tradition she knows this piece of Torah that if somebody is mistreated, God is going to come and defend them. How does God defend them? God is going to kill the person who mistreated them. So just to unpack this, who mistreated who, right? Remember, Rabban Gamliel is the leader of the community. He and his people and Rabbi Eliezer had this debate. Rabbi Eliezer lost the debate. And who excommunicated him? Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel excommunicated him. And the reason why Imma Shalom was paying such close attention to him, because she understood and knew this tradition that is in fact in the Gemara, and we're going to look at it in a second, that when people mistreat, if one person mistreats another person, then God comes to their defense and something bad is going to happen to the person who mistreats them.
So Rabbi Sara, in a certain sense, she was protecting her brother despite the fact that her brother mistreated him. I mean, she was really, it's an interesting phenomenon. I mean, she still was on the side, she still supported her brother despite.
Right, so what we're already seeing is that she is, was she really just this internal protector, or is she suddenly a mediator? Is she suddenly like the political go-between between Rabban Gamliel and her husband, right? At first blush, we thought she was just protecting her husband, but Teddy, you're right. Like there seems to be something else going on. We know from the beginning that she is introduced as the sister of and the wife of, and what that actually is telling us, that she was playing a role as mediator. So let's go a little bit further. We want to first, before we look at the context of the story, and we're going to do that very quickly, I want us to just look at one other story of Imma Shalom to, again, try to turn on our head the image of her as angel of the house. So here's a story, one of my favorites. I use this story to teach when I teach brides and grooms. It's part of my sexual ethics class. When I'm building the question about what husband and wife can do, in the privacy of their home. So it's a little bit risque, but it's worth bringing to us. So very risque. So basically, Rabbi Yochanan ben Davai says that the ministering angels we're talking about magic, by the way. Here's another magical expression of I don't know, rabbinic science. I don't even know how to describe it, but Rabbi Yochanan ben Davai is basically ascetic. He's trying to put forth a very ascetic view of sexual practice. And so I'll just do it in English. He says basically, the ministering angels told me 4 things. For what reason do lame people come into existence? It's because the fathers overturn their tables, i.e. they engage in sexual intercourse in an atypical way. For what reason do mute people come into existence? Is because their fathers kiss their place. For what reason do deaf people come into existence? Is because their parents converse while engaged in sexual intercourse. For what reason do blind people come into existence? Because their fathers stare at their place. It's a terrible Gemara, right? It's just terrible. Rabbi Yochanan ben Davai is terrible. We're not going to spend so much time on him, but what we're basically, he is trying to present this awful, very ascetic view of basically saying, don't talk during sex, don't do anything, I don't know, too risque during sex. But the Gemara comes the Gemara comes and contradicts this das yachid, this one person opinion, and the Gemara raises a contradiction. here we Imma Shalom again, right? Imma Shalom, the wife of Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. So by the way, let's just be clear that oh, well, actually the Gemara doesn't like note him as her husband. The bolded part is the Gemara, and the unbolded part is Safaria's like explanation. So it's actually interesting that Imma Shalom is introduced here in the Gemara, not as the wife of, just Imma Shalom herself. Imma Shalom was asked, for what reason are your children so beautiful? Okay, so remember we just said that your children are going to be beautiful if you fulfill this obligation of having an ascetic sexual ethic. And so it seems at first view that Imma Shalom is the quintessential like example of this, because she has beautiful children. Her children are not deaf or blind or etc. It's terrible. I get it. We're not going to spend time on this, but just to get a sense of who Imma Shalom was. She said to them, my husband does not converse with me while engaging in sexual intercourse, neither at the beginning of the night nor at the end of night, but rather at midnight. And when he converses with me while engaging in sexual intercourse, he reveals a handbreadth of my body and covers a handbreadth and covers himself up as though he was being coerced by a demon and is covering himself out of fear. And I said to my husband, what is the reason for this behavior? And he said to me, it is so that I will not set my eyes on another woman, i.e. think about another woman. If a man thinks about another woman during sexual intercourse with his wife, his children consequently come close to receiving a mamzer status, become bastards. Okay, here's the thing. If we can like break through the craziness of this Gemara, let's understand what's actually happening here, because it's totally revolutionary. Think about it for a second. The Gemara is first setting up Imma Shalom as the quintessential Puritan, right? She's the example of this awful Rabbi Yochanan ben Davai sort of lone opinion. But then what happens is a shift in the middle. And she suddenly says, my children are beautiful because my husband doesn't converse with me all the time, only sometimes. He's actually conversing with me during sex, right? So now she's like countering this principle and saying that, yes, you think my children are beautiful because I fulfill your concept? No, that's not true. We literally talk during sex. And what else is so crazy and revolutionary about this Gemara? This is happening in public. The rabbis are coming to her in the Beit Midrash and having this very risque conversation with her, right? Is that Puritan? Is that like, does that fulfill our concept of this like angelic woman in the house? No, it's the complete opposite, right? It's completely throws all of our like concepts of like the woman's job. She is suddenly being the like set up as the person who's being consulted about these, private things in a public domain. So we have this private woman, this Imma Shalom, this angel in the house that's suddenly coming outside of the house and being asked these very risque things and very casually sort of describing, the non-aesthetic view of what it means to be engaged in a sexual relationship with her husband. So I know that was like a lot to take in, but it's setting the stage for what we already know, which is that Imma Shalom isn't just the perfect angel in the house. So I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to keep going. So I gave you the context outside, but let me just point out a few other points for why our Imma Shalom Gemara is set up the way it's set up, and to further describe it. So where are we? This is actually a very long Gemara. We're not going to look at the whole thing, but I wanted to give it to you as a gift so you can study it yourself if you would like. This is, it goes on several pages of the Gemara. This part is before our Imma Shalom story. So let's just begin reading it. Rabbi Yochanan says, in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Gadol onaat devarim me onaat mamon. So this is important. Because the beginning of this whole conversation is the statement by Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai that says, greater is the transgression of verbal mistreatment than the transgression of monetary exploitation. perhaps this whole Gemara is about the way people treat each other. It's all about ona'ah, verbal mistreatment. Remember how our Gemara ended, right? With her statement. So when she knew the tradition of what happens when people mistreat each other verbally, what is she referencing? She's probably referencing the statement by Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, who said that it's the worst, it's a greater transgression to verbally mistreat somebody than to exploit somebody monetarily, right? It's much worse to speak badly to people than to steal somebody's money. And so, and then Rabbi Chisda says just at the bottom of that paragraph, just at the bottom of page 3, all the gates of heaven are apt to be locked, except for the gates of prayer for victims of verbal mistreatment, right? Again, this is a reference to our story. Ima Shalom knew this Rabbi Chisda statement that all gates of heaven are locked, except if two people are mistreated, God is going to come to the defense of the person who was mistreated. Ima Shalom knew this. She knew that that her brother was like, something bad might happen to him because he mistreated her husband. And therefore, she was trying to prevent him from praying for her brother's demise. Okay, so let's keep going to the top of page 4. I bought this just to give over the irony that in the story of describing Ima Shalom, we also have a reminder from Rabbi Chelbo and actually other rabbis that women are actually associated with the house. Rabbi Chelbo says a person must always be careful about sustaining the honor of his wife, as blessing is found in a person's house only because of his wife, as it's stated in allusion, and he dealt well with Abraham for her sake, etc., meaning that if you honor your wife and if you treat her well, then life will be good. So again, like perhaps these statements are here as a foil for us to unravel and unwrap through the actions of Ima Shalom. Okay, apropos the topic of verbal mistreatment, we learn in a Mishnah that if one cut an earthenware oven widthwise into segments and place sand between each and every segment, Rabbi Eliezer, Ima Shalom's husband, deems it ritually pure, and the rabbis deem it ritually impure. So now we're going to introduce our famous story of the oven of Achnai. The oven of Achnai is literally, Achnai means a snake. It's an oven of a snake, and the reason why it's called that is because the halachic question is all about whether an oven, it's actually sort of a beautiful idea, but it's also a little bit esoteric. But just think about it. If an oven is broken and cannot be fixed, it is ritually pure. It's ritually pure because only things that can be fixed and are not broken are susceptible to ritual impurity and therefore can be made pure again. But if it's broken, it's no longer an oven. If it's no longer an oven, it's not susceptible to purity or impurity. What that means is that it's like this whole debate isn't, meaning it's not an oven. So like, what is it? It might as well be a snake, and we know that snakes, and the presence of snakes makes things impure. And so the ultimate like debate is about whether this achnai, this oven, is actually an oven or not an oven. Right. And so Rabbi Eliezer says it's not an oven and everybody else says it is. OK, so let's just get a little bit of the story. And this is known as the oven of Achnai. After failing to convince the rabbis logically, Rabbi Eliezer said to them, if the halacha is in accordance with my opinion, the carob tree will prove it. The carob tree was uprooted from its place, 100 cubits, and some say 400 cubits. Then the rabbi said, one does not cite halachic proofs on the carob tree. Rabbi Eliezer says, fine, if the halacha is in accordance with my opinion, the stream will prove it. The water of the stream turned backward and began flowing in the opposite direction. They said to him, one does not cite halachic proof from a stream. Rabbi Eliezer then said, if the halacha is in accordance with my opinion, the walls of the study hall will prove it. The walls of the study hall leaned in. And by the way, this is such a metaphor, right? The whole like foundation of the Beit Midrash is being shaken, right? The walls are shaking. They're now inverted. That didn't collapse, but it's shaky a little bit. The foundation is like leaning in. The walls of the study hall leaned in when it began to fall. Rabbi Yeshua scolded, and the walls said to them, if Torah scholars are contending with each other in the matters of halacha, what is the nature of your involvement in the dispute? the Gemara relates the walls did not fall because of the deference due to Rabbi Yeshua, but they did not straighten because of the deference due to Rabbi Eliezer, and they will remain leaning. I want to just unpack that for a second. And Rabbi Eliezer then said to them, if the halacha is in accordance with my opinion, heaven will prove it. A divine voice emerged from heaven and said, why are you differing with Rabbi Eliezer, as the halacha is in accordance with his opinion, every place that he expresses opinion. Okay, so this is when the bat kol comes out. And then just to finish this part of the story, Rabbi Yeshua stood and said, it is not in heaven. Right? Rabbi Yeshua is our innovator. He's the person who wants to like be forward thinking. It's all about the rabbis. And then they ultimately say that the Torah takes precedent, and even God somehow like smiles and says, yeah, I guess my children know what's best, and it's no longer about me. And then we have the next part of the Gemara, which is the story of how the rabbis decide to excommunicate Rabbi Eliezer, right? So we won't look at this inside, but that's what the next chunk is, where they ultimately tell him that like there's no part for him here. Rabbi Akiva, who actually was his student, is the person who's sent to go excommunicate him. So just think about how painful this is, right? You have Rabbi Eliezer, who's like great Rebbe, and Rabbi Akiva, who's at this moment his student, is elected to go tell him. And what's his reaction? He rents his clothing and he sobs. His eyes shed tears, and he just falls into a puddle, like he can't handle it. And from this point on, and then by the way, Rabbi Gamliel almost dies right at the bottom of at the top of page 6. There's this moment where Rabbi Gamliel almost drowns, but somehow he is saved. The waters are calmed down. And then we have our story back in source number 11. We have our Imma Shalom story, which we've read already. Okay, so I want to just say that it's possible that whereas we thought this Achnai story is about a debate between heaven or God and rabbis, given its full context, what might you say it's actually about? Right? If it's not about a debate about not in heaven, when you see it in its full context, isn't it possibly about the relationship between people and people? Right? Going back to that line about the Beit Midrash, there's something, the walls of the Beit Midrash that fall. I'll just read it. Where right, the walls of the study hall leaned inward, about to fall, and Rabbi Yeshua said, if Torah scholars are contending with each other in matters of halacha, like what is going to be? They suddenly realize that something is soured, right? To the extent that their debate has so I don't know, like imploded, that the walls of the Beit Midrash have been shattered.
It has to do with disrespect for each other, disrespect for each other's opinion, and also the vast mistreatment that occurs as a result of it.
Right, and perhaps because this whole story was introduced about mistreating and it ended with mistreating one another, perhaps this whole story is actually not about, it's not in heaven anymore, which is what we thought it was, but is simply about the nature of two of people arguing with one another and mistreating one another, and what happens. And what happens as a result of that is God, like, wrath comes down and ultimately kills Rabban Gamliel, because Imma Shalom she tried to be the mediator between these two men. She tried to be the mediator between husband and brother. And in the end, it didn't work out. But I think that the main point, and now let's just look at 12, just to start bringing it together. Imma Shalom is keeper of the peace, right? Her name, Shalom, the mother of peace. is the ultimate mediator. Within the broad context of the Bavli, she is the literary character used to connect Rabbi Eliezer and Rabban Gamliel. Within the immediate context of the sugya of the section, she links the story back to the preceding discussion. And within the story itself, she tries to intercede between her feuding husband and brother. She's literally the person who leaves the home, who is no longer the person who is only inside the house. She has a great, if the angel of the house is meant to have nothing to do with the political sphere, she literally is the person that's trying to like reshape the politics of this moment, is to keep it whole, to straighten out the walls of the Beit Midrash, so to speak. And in fact, and with this will end, and this is really Gila Fine's like point that I just loved at the end, and meaning we could have just ended there. We could have just ended to say, yes, she undermines this perception of what it means to be an angel in the house. But Gila Fine goes one step further and says, okay, if Imma Shalom is not the angel in the house, who is? Who is the angel in the house? And her assessment is that it must be Rabbi Eliezer. Right, so this now turns the whole story on its head. Why is it Rabbi Eliezer? Who was excommunicated and forced to remain in the house? Rabbi
Eliezer.
Who like dropped in tears in the moment that anything bad happened? Rabbi Eliezer. Who is being protected, right, as opposed to the protector? Rabbi Eliezer. And in ironies of ironies, before we read this last thing, I wanted to just tell us that it is Rabbi Eliezer who elsewhere in the Gemara says that if you teach Torah to women, it's as if you're teaching them licentiousness, right? It's a, right? So this man who's married to this Imma Shalom, fantastic woman who knows so much Torah, it seems, based on context of what we're saying, he is the one who says, don't teach your daughters Torah. We undermine it in the end, and we don't paskin, we don't go according to him. But we, like scholars, female scholars, have to deal with the statement and understand what it means. In ironies of ironies, he becomes the angel of the house. So let's just end off with how Gila Fine describes it. Hence, it is Rabbi Eliezer, not Imma Shalom, who is the real angel in the house of the oven of Achnai. The tragedy of Achnai is not, as we had originally thought, the result of the woman's foray from the private to the public, but rather of the man's banishment from the public to the private, right? The implications of this gender reversal are radical. In identifying Rabbi Eliezer with the angel in the house and the confinement to the private sphere as a source of this ona'ah, remember this, that means mistreatment, there is an unspoken acknowledgement of the deprivation that is the lot of women everywhere. The text establishes Rabbi Eliezer as the woman of the Achnai story at the very same time as it elicits our sympathy for his excommunication from the Beit Midrash, the distress it causes, the tears it makes him shed. This sympathy cannot but be projected back onto the story's context, onto the woman for whom Rabbi Eliezer stands. The woman whose exclusion from the world of Torah is just as cruel, its effects just as devastating. The Talmud may not say so explicitly, but the analogy is clear. Women are in a constant state of excommunication. So she can't save all women, right? She can't save all women from this concept of being the angels in the home. And I wanted to just like remind us that in the 20th century, with the feminist mystique with Betty Friedan, right? This trope of angel of the angel in the house was already being undone by saying that actually women didn't want to stay in the house. They wanted to, you know, that was where the housewife syndrome was the phrase housewife syndrome was being coined as the association with this like depression really that women were having, meaning there was this like, you know, in the 50s, women wanted, like, they weren't happy anymore just staying at home. Again, I do understand this class issue that Carol brought in, but there's a sense that women felt excommunicated and wanted to emerge and leave the house. And here we have Imma Shalom, who like broke through this trope and was able to like transverse the private to the public. And then there's hope, perhaps there's hope for other women.
Rabbi Sara, could I just say
Wait,
one thing?
one second, sorry, one second.
I understand what Rabbi Eliezer says, that whoever teaches the Torah teaches the licentiousness. And I don't understand this excuse for it. It just, that part is, he's been so, I don't understand how it follows, her explanation.
Well, okay, so just to explain that in order to understand who right, we could have spent a long time telling you who Rabbi Eliezer was. I just brought brief moments of it. One, the Achnai, and this other, where he is supposed to be the quintessential protector, the quintessential man, the quintessential, opposite of the angel in the house. He's supposed to be the person who thinks women's roles are not learning Torah. Women's roles are meant to be at home. And in the end, what Gila Fine does is she just implodes that view, right? This guy who thinks that he's the protector and, like women are just vessels, women are just, meant to not have brains, essentially. In the end, she's trying to undermine that and say, who really is the angel of the house, who really couldn't handle, the world and needed protection and was crying. It's Rabbi Eliezer. And who was the hero of the story, who was the political mediator? Imma Shalom. And so she
read it again, that last thing, but this stage or nothing.
okay.
Rabbi Sara, could you stop sharing so we could see you? Yeah.
Yes.
I have 2 points to make. One is that the socio-political environment also changed women's role, that women went to work not only because they wanted to become something, but because they had to, number one. A lot of women have to work because of economic reasons. The other thing is that the Rabbi, if anybody read the book, The Rabbi, my understanding is he was a man before his time, because he promoted the concept of women learning Torah because of their position in the home, how important it is for the chinuch of the children. So, so I think that's an important point to make.
Thank you. So next time we're going to look at the shrew,
When are we doing this again? I'm sorry.
next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday.
And we're going to look at the prototype of the shrew and try to see how she undermines that idea.
Thank you.
The shrew. Thank you. So good to see
It's
you.
fascinating. Thank you so much, Rabbi Sara. This is amazing.
All right. Enjoy.
I wish
Other
the
one
whole
point.
book. I wish we could go through the whole book.
Yeah, it's awesome. Really is.
Okay, thank you.
When Rabbi Sara, when you were talking about the strife and the walls caving in, I couldn't help but to see in my mind's eye the vision of when some of the right-wing protesters forced their way into the Beit Din, the Tzvai, Beit Din Tzvai. And that was such a terrible thing to see the Jews fighting among ourselves.
Yeah, it's true. It's good Tisha B'Av, Torah. All right,
Right.
everybody. Thank you.
Yasher Kocheh.
Bye.